Hey everyone, hope you guys are having a great day. I am going to be doing the lecture today on video, so you guys are going to get to see me on a screen, talking in front of a screen, talking about turbidity and conductivity. So, two more of the string parameters. I'm going to talk for a little bit about what both of these parameters are, do sort of the usual notes. So if you don't have your lab manuals out, now would be a good time to get that lab manual out so you can fill in a couple of those boxes at the bottom of that, at the back of your lab manual. And then when we're done with the notes here today, then we're going to go back and do a couple of labs. Both of them today are pretty easy, and so that's what we're going to do in class time today. And then you should have some time at the end of the class period to work on the homework. The homework today for next class is just going to be Socrative stuff. So there's nothing that's actually going to get turned in. You're just going to be working on it in class time, do the reading, do the questions, and then hopefully be ready for Socrative next class. That'll be Monday when I'm back here. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk a little bit about turbidity and conductivity. So these are two things that are kind of related to each other that we'll test when we actually go out to the creek. So the first one, turbidity. Turbidity is basically a measure of how clear or murky water is. So the unit for this is NTUs. That's turbidity units, basically. And if you look at a couple samples of water, this sample over here, that's the gold sample, that has really low turbidity. The numbers are going to be low. Like I would guess that this one over here probably has a turbidity that's around 1. Turbidity around 1 or 2, that means the water is really clear. This one up here is probably in the hundreds. This is really murky water. So that's really what turbidity is. It's a measure of light being able to pass through the water, and it's a measure of how clear or murky water is. So that's what the parameter is. Moving on to your second box in the note sheet, let's talk a little bit about why turbidity matters. So the first thing is just when you have murky water, it makes it hard for plants to grow. The murkiness, the turbidity in the water blocks the sunlight getting through, and it just makes it hard for the plants to grow, so they can't really photosynthesize quite as well. So that's the first reason that this is an important thing. It affects the plants that live in there. The next reason, so the other thing that affects living organisms in the stream, is that if the water is murky like you have here, a lot of fish are visual predators, and it just makes it hard for them to see what they're trying to catch. Right? So really murky water, the fish can't see, the insects that are predators can't see nearly as well. It just makes it harder for them to find their food. So that's another reason why murky water is bad. Another way of thinking of this is sort of thinking like a room filled with smoke. It would be hard for you to see, but what else would it be hard for you to do? If the room was filled with smoke, it would be pretty hard for you to breathe as well. And that is exactly what happens with fish and insects that are living in the water. When the water is really murky, their gills get clogged with that sediment, and it's just harder for them to breathe. So for the fish, the insects, things like crayfish, any macroinvertebrate living in the stream, murky water like this, that's going to make it pretty hard for those things to be able to survive in the creek if it's murky and turbid for a really long period of time. So these are sort of the biggest reasons, but you add on top of that when you have a lot of sediment in the water, it smothers the eggs, it smothers the insects that are on the bottom of the stream, and murky water is not really good for anything that's living in a creek. It's not good for the plants, it's not good for the insects and the eggs on the bottom, it's not good for the fish that are breathing and looking for food. Murky water, like you might guess, if you see water that looks really cloudy, that's not as healthy a water. So this is why this is an important parameter. In terms of what influences turbidity, what are the things that make water cloudy, that make water murky? So the biggest thing is erosion and runoff. I think I told you guys when we were doing the stream flow out at the creek. When I was out there, when I first got out there before it started raining, the water was pretty clear in Springbrook Creek. But then once it started raining, a lot of dirt and sediment started washing in. that erosion from the surrounding soils, the surrounding yards, things like that, that gets into the creek and it makes the water murky and cloudy. So any kind of erosion, runoff, when trees have been cut down and the soil is loose, that's going to be bad. You don't need to write all this down, but just the idea of the bottom sediments getting stirred up. So what can stir up the bottom sediments? Well, it could be boats. Like if you've ever been boating out in the Willamette River, the waves from the boats, the wakes, that stirs up sediment on the bottom and on the shore. That makes the water more cloudy. People swimming, walking in there. In a place like Tryon Creek, all through Tryon Creek there are signs. Anywhere there's a bridge, anywhere where you're near the creek, there are signs that say, don't let your pet or don't walk down into the creek. Why? Because that's going to stir up the bottom sediments. That's going to make the water more cloudy. And for the fish that live in there in Tryon Creek, it's not so good for them. So anything that's going to stir up the bottom, that's going to be something that's going to increase turbidity. Algae is going to make the water more turbid. So the lake right now has higher turbidity than Springbrook Creek does because there's a lot of algae in the creek. So the algae is something that makes the water not quite as clear. Any kind of decomposing material. So in the fall when you have leaves, if you have a bunch of sediments on the bottom, that stuff is potentially going to add to the turbidity as well. So decomposing material. And then one of the biggest things around here, rainfall. I've talked about this before, but this is a bigger deal in a city than it is out in the forest. If you have a forest, you've got the trees, their leaves, things like that, they sort of absorb some of the rain. It doesn't hit, it doesn't wash as much dirt into the river. In a city, you've got yards, you've got parking lots and roads and things like that. When the water hits those things, it's almost definitely going to wash stuff in. So you get more turbidity after rainfall in a city than you would in other places. So these are some of the things, the sources, the things that influence turbidity, what can make turbidity go up. The flip side of this is if you have trees, so how do you improve turbidity of a stream? If you have trees in the riparian zone, that's the word we learned on our hike. If you have trees in the riparian zone, that's going to help hold the soil in place much better, and that's going to keep stuff from washing into the stream. So when you guys are doing the lab, you're going to be using this machine right here. This is called a turbidimeter. It's one of the easiest tools that we'll use. Basically, you turn it on. You get a little vial like this, and I'm going to fill it with water from the sink. So we've got a vial of water, and try to wipe that off. All I have to do to get a reading is I just stick this in with the arrow or the diamond facing forward, stick it in, push it all the way down. I want to close the lid. Close the lid, that way there's no light from outside getting in. It needs to be set flat. And then I just push the button that says read. It's pretty easy. So it needs to sit flat, but I hit that read button, and you can probably guess that the turbidity of this water, since it's from the faucet, is going to be pretty low. We only have one turbidimeter. I'm going to have you guys do 2 readings in the buckets in back. There's water from Tryon Creek. You guys are going to grab samples. You're going to fill your little vials with water from one from each of the buckets, and you'll take turns reading it. So my turbidity reading, you probably can't see that very well, but it came out less than 1, 0.74. That makes sense that water from the faucet is going to be pretty clear. All right. So that's what turbidity is. You guys, when you do that, so the turbidity data sheet is on page 43, and you guys, you and your group are going to just do a couple readings. So fill both of these vials and use the turbidimeter. You'll have to take turns because we only have one, so some groups can do turbidity first, some groups can do conductivity first. Both the labs today are super easy, so it shouldn't take you very long to do. All right, so that's turbidity. That's our first thing. Turbidity is stuff in the water that you can see. Like if there's a problem with turbidity, you can see by looking at the water that something